Chapter 21. Invitation of the Queen of the Sea. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When he returned to the banquet, Apollo was still filled with wonder. What did Athena mean by that just now? Hecate suddenly came up to him and said, "Why do you have a fragrance on you? Did you go on a rendezvous with one of the goddesses?" "The goddess is there, that place is indeed very dark," Apollo thought to himself. He said with a bright smile, "I just went for a trip, nothing else happened here, right?" Hecate shook her head and said, "It's still the same, the atmosphere has been strange since His Majesty Poseidon spoke of Antaeus." Apollo asked again, "Where is Astrea?" Hecate said, "She was called by the goddess Amphitrite for a chat and also called us along with her, but I didn't agree since you weren't there." Apollo turned his attention to where Amphitrite was, and many gods surrounded her. Athena also went there. Apollo's expression changed. The banquet went very smoothly, and it slowly came to an end while many gods were eating and drinking carnivally. Apollo paid attention to the movements of Amphitrite and Poseidon and found that both were in normal state. With the passage of time, the gods near Amphitrite first increased and then dispersed. Poseidon, on the other hand, sat on the throne from beginning to end, holding the son of the Earth Mother without any movement. Just when Apollo thought everything was over, Astrea, who came back, said to him, "Goddess Amphitrite invited you and Hecate to go to her bedroom." Apollo and Hecate looked at each other and followed Astrea to an elegantly furnished palace. Amphitrite changed from the long, dignified dress she had worn at the party and put on a short, close-fitting dress to sit with her son, Triton. Seeing Apollo and Hecate coming, she smiled and said, "Come on, sit down." After the two sat down, Amphitrite asked kindly, "How did you feel at the banquet today?" Apollo replied, "It is very lively. Just lively." Amphitrite's tone suddenly turned a little colder, and she said quietly, "Indeed, there is nothing else but lively." Noticing the change in his mother's voice, Prince Triton lowered his head somewhat timidly. Seeing his reaction, Amphitrite let out a long sigh, and her eyes focused on Apollo and Hecate. "Do you know why I want to see you at the end? You are all excellent gods and will be the pillars of the future divine court." Amphitrite said in a solemn tone. "As a person, I am very mediocre in other aspects, but I am very good at reading people, even superior to my sister, who is famous for her wisdom. When she and I respectively fell in love with Zeus and Poseidon, later Zeus's achievements were really above Poseidon, but that sister of mine did not have the opportunity to enjoy the return on investment while I have been sitting firmly in the position of the Queen of the Sea." Amphitrite smiled complacently. Of course, Apollo knew who she was talking about, her sister, Metis, Athena's mother. This former goddess of wisdom was the first goddess who took a fancy to Zeus. First, she helped Zeus rescue several brothers and single-handedly assisted Zeus in winning the Titans' war and becoming the gods' king. Initially, she would be the queen of the gods for granted, but because of a prophecy, she was swallowed by her beloved husband. She could only claim that the end was grim, the wise man had a short life, and beauty was fleeting. In contrast, the less prominent sister Amphitrite reaped the better rewards. But now my position is very awkward." Amphitrite suddenly stood up, and her beautiful cheeks were like a deep well. While Apollo and Hecate were focused, she said quietly, "After today, you should all know that His Majesty has received the support of the Earth Mother. He will start a war against my father and Pontos to complete the unification of the ocean." Although there were speculations, after really hearing the news, Apollo and Hecate were still a little shocked. The primordial god of the sea, Pontos, and the ocean lord, Oceanus, were the lords of the ocean in previous generations, with great strength and power. Poseidon had always relied on the support of Olympus, plus some marriages, to barely occupy a third of the ocean. And now, if he wanted to complete the unification of the ocean, he would have to bring Pontos and Oceanus under his command. Even Zeus, who sat high in Olympus, will probably tremble in front of this brother. This is, of course, a crucial step for the Sea Emperor, but for me, it is a step that shakes the foundation. Although my relationship with my father and brother is not good, I can sit firmly in the current position because I was born in the ocean gods. Once the war starts, my situation is going to be the most awkward. Amphitrite's face was calm, and she stared at the two young gods in front of her. So I need to deal with it early. That day is actually a little far away. It will probably be after Antaeus grows up, so I found you. She smiled. Hecate, you have been promoted to the main god, plus goddess Nyx values you, appointed as the deputy king of the underworld, and soon you will become the goddess who dominates the situation in the underworld. And you, Apollo, I believe that in less than 100 years, you will be able to ascend to Olympus, exalt the position of the main god, become a great god no less than Athena, and influence the situation of Olympus. So I hope to unite with you to form a powerful alliance that can influence Olympus, the underworld, and the ocean. The straightforward and unabashed words surprised both Apollo and Hecate. Especially Apollo. Although he was also confident in himself that it would not take long to become one of the most powerful gods. But no matter how you look at it, right now, he was an insignificant figure. Seeing the silence of the two, Amphitrite still smiled. I am the only beneficiary of the cooperation between us. At least I can help you, Apollo, and your sister return to Olympus. Hearing this condition, Apollo smiled faintly. Looking at Hecate next to him, he found that the latter was looking at him with questioning eyes. It seemed that she would agree as long as he made up his mind. Amphitrite also noticed this and looked at Apollo quietly. The atmosphere in the palace suddenly calmed down. Under Amphitrite's gaze, Apollo raised his head. Can I ask you a question? What kind of question? Have you also invited the goddess Athena? Hearing the name, Amphitrite suddenly smiled and nodded gently. That's for sure, she's my sister's daughter, then I hope we can have great cooperation in the future. Apollo stood up with a faint smile. Chapter 22. Surrounded. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When did you become so familiar with the goddess Athena that you agreed as soon as you heard that she was involved? On the way back, Hecate kept pouting. Apollo explained, I believe she is the wisest goddess among the gods, and she must justify her choice. Hecate was still angry. You know she is the wisest after just one meeting, your ability to read people seems more powerful than the goddess Amphitrite. Apollo smiled and did not speak, his eyes swept to the side of Astrea. The latter gave him a skillful smile. Apollo asked, Sister Astrea, you have also promised goddess Amphitrite. Is this your personal intention, or does it represent the Lord of the Stars? Astrea blinked and whispered, I came here to represent both father and mother. Apollo understood what she meant. The Lord of the Stars agreed to an alliance with Amphitrite but didn't want to get too involved, so he only sent his daughter. Knowing this, he became a little more optimistic about the future of this alliance. Astreus, the Lord of the Stars, was not well known, but his strength and power were not to be underestimated. He was the father of the stars in the sky and the gods of the wind. He completely dominated the starry sky, and his tentacles of power also spread over the earth. For example, Poseidon, Oceanus, and Pontos, which were divided into 3 parts of the sea, dared to call themselves gods and kings. In terms of the vastness and the number of gods, the boundless star sea was actually no narrower than the ocean and land or even more vast. Such a powerful god who could be called the ruler of one party was rarely known. It was enough to see how low profile and terrifying he was. Apollo was pondering when his face turned abruptly cold. His golden eyes glanced at the waves ahead and shot out fiery rays of light. Last time, I failed to turn you to ashes. This time, are you here to seek the burning of your soul? Boom! The pure white flame in Apollo's palm emerged, turned into a ball of fire, and blasted into the ocean. Hecate and Astrea looked over. As the flame spread, several strong divine power fluctuations rose abruptly. One of them was none other than Achilles. I didn't expect your perception to be so keen. Achilles gazed at Apollo with an ugly expression on his face. The latter ignored him completely, and the pure white flame flew out violently, carrying majestic heat, and flew towards him. At this time, several gods around Achilles took out a red stove, and the divine power enveloped the void. When the blazing, pure white flame touched its vicinity, a huge suction force suddenly surged out of the furnace. A mass of gorgeous flames was all absorbed directly into it. Achilles smiled proudly. How could I fail twice with the same move? This condensing furnace is specially designed to restrain your flame magic. Let's see how you can match me without this move. Oh, so you came here after preparation. Apollo's eyes lifted slightly, the golden light flickered, and his body filled with great coercion. Achilles's face was frozen. You have improved rapidly over the years, but unfortunately, I have done more than that to prepare. Suddenly, several gods around him revealed their majestic auras. Astrea said. It's you, Gorgon, Flotel, Les. These gods were all well-known upper gods in the ocean and were attached to the oceanic gods. There's more than that. Achilles smiled wickedly. There was a terrifying suffocating aura from behind. Accompanied by the cold voice of Ares. Son of Leto, earlier that woman Athena was present, but now there is no one to help you. He revealed the majestic pressure belonging to the main god, and the overwhelming aura of war and killing enveloped Apollo and others. Achilles and the other upper gods also gathered at various angles. Achilles laughed loudly. Apollo, for upper gods, and one main god, there is no one who can save you today. Hecate, Astrea, you two better hurry up and leave, or we won't be polite to you either. In Olympus, looking at the picture in the crystal, Hera also smiled. For upper gods and one main god were fully prepared. There were only two upper god-level goddesses besides the son of Leto, who were sure to die. Haha. After I get rid of Apollo, I have to get rid of that Artemis too. Leto, do you think I can't do anything if you hide with Cronus and the others? She was laughing freely when her face changed abruptly. She saw that Apollo stood on the vast sea in the crystal with a calm expression. Beside him, Hecate suddenly walked out with a chuckle. A powerful aura that only belonged to the main god came out of her body. Ares and Achilles' faces turned pale. How is this possible? She has been promoted to the main god. Feeling the unparalleled aura of Hecate, Achilles' face was full of gloom. He painstakingly laid out a plan and thought it was completely flawless. But why did Hecate become the main god? He couldn't believe it. So what if you are promoted to the main god? Ares, stop her, let's clean up Leto's son. Gritting his teeth, Achilles shouted to Ares and led the four upper gods around to Apollo. Humph, when have I ever needed to listen to you? Ares snorted coldly. For a mere newly promoted main god, I only need a few moves to win. Only a coward like you would be afraid. Filled with disdain, he pulled out his saber and appeared beside Hecate, bursting with the momentum of the third-rank main god. Unexpectedly, Hecate snorted, filling her body with the powerful momentum of the third-rank main god. Seeing Achilles and the others gathered around, Apollo said to the star goddess beside him, Sister Astrea, you go aside first. Apollo, are you sure you want to do this? I'm not weak, and I can help you. Astrea looked at him worriedly. Apollo chuckled and glanced at the four surrounding people, his golden eyes burned like flames. For upper gods, that's just enough to make me move. Achilles, I just had a little friendship with your sister, the goddess Amphitrite. If you didn't show up before me, I wouldn't bother to ask you about what happened last time, but now that you are so ignorant, I have no choice but to satisfy your pleasure in finding death. No one can save you this time. The flames rising from the golden eyes were like the sun, and Apollo had a severe expression. What a joke, with the artifact that restrains your strange flames, do you think I would be afraid of you? Achilles sneered and winked at the three gods beside him. The four upper gods immediately attacked Apollo from four directions. Chapter 23. My glory travels in the sky, earth, and the sea. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hecate, I know your name, and it is said that you are working on magic that can perform extraordinary power without the corresponding divine power of the priesthood. But I'll tell you, all of this is unnecessary. The only way to conquer everything is with true power. Ares held a shield in one hand, swung a giant sword in the other, exuding a tyrannical aura, and charged fiercely toward Hecate. Sure enough, he's a brute who only knows how to cut people down. Hecate spoke with sarcasm. She liked handsome gods like Apollo, who were polite and knowledgeable. On the contrary, she scoffed at the gods who had developed limbs and only knew how to use brute force. L.Rga Brown's staff appeared in her hand, and she pointed it towards the air, and a dark light suddenly shot towards Ares. Boom! Ares swung his sword horizontally and hit the light. However, he was surprised that the light only had a weak power fluctuation. Sure enough, it's a fledgling main god. He laughed darkly, and his sword, with an endless war fury in his hand, slashed swiftly on top of Hecate's head. But when it fell, Ares was shocked to find that his sword had missed. It was simply impossible. The dignified god of war, how could there be such a thing as missing while cutting people? He didn't want to believe it and yelled. The blade turned and slashed at Hecate's throat. But something strange happened again. Although his movements were precise, when the huge sword cut out, it took a weird arc and completely deviated from the original track it should have taken. However, he only realized it in the end. Are you surprised? The direction of everything is often guided by opportunity, and I am the goddess of opportunity. Hecate's calm voice came faintly. Ares felt a chill on his back, and a majestic divine force hit his body. War domain. Sensing the impending danger, Ares roared, and a bloody shadow suddenly appeared on his body. Swords, noise, slaughter, blood, corpses, flames. One after another image, like a carefully drawn oil painting, constituted a phantom of the battlefield filled with evil spirits. In Olympus, seeing this scene through the crystal, Hera's face was full of surprise. To actually make Ares use the power of the domain that belongs to the main god alone right from the start, it's no wonder that Hecate is favored by the goddess Nyx. Although there was such an accident, fortunately, the situation is still under control. She manipulated the crystal and looked in the other direction of the battlefield. The blonde-haired Apollo stood silently on the sea while his white robe fluttered in the wind. Achilles and the other three gods surrounded him step by step. Son of Leto, remember my name, Gorgon, the name of the man who killed you. The first to take action was the blue-haired god who called himself Gorgon. With his divine power, the boundless ocean rolled up into monstrous waves in the blink of an eye, slapping against Apollo on the sea's surface. Immediately, the two gods, except Achilles, also attacked. One rolled up a monstrous hurricane that shook the sea, and one made the bottom of the sea grow countless water plants, twisting and rolling out of the sea. Watching the battle from afar, Astrea looked a little anxious and warned. Apollo, Gorgon is the god of raging waves, Flottle is the god of sea breeze, and Les is the god of seaweed. They are all naturally born gods of the sea. As early as the period of the first generation of gods, the primordial sea god Pontos was active in the ocean when he ruled the sea. Later, he was subdued by Oceanus and classified into the oceanic gods, each of which was an upper god. It turned out to be a god of nature. A smile appeared on the corner of Apollo's mouth. There were three origins of the gods in the Greek world, and the most important was the god race that had their parents and bloodlines. Most of the gods today were born in this way, and they belonged to a single family. The second type of god was naturally born, and this type of god was best known for the five primordial gods, symbolizing a part of the composition of the world. But the five primordial gods were only the most powerful and oldest of these gods. There were many similar gods. However, most of these natural gods perished in the ignorant era at the beginning of chaos, and most of the rest died during the reign of the first king of gods, Uranus. So that the entire gods remained were only the children of the Earth Mother and Uranus. As for the third type, it was the gods born for some special reasons. The most famous of them was Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty. Her birth was caused by the scythe seizure of the throne of the first generation king of gods Uranus and the second generation Cronus. The blood of the first generation god, King Uranus, splashed into the ocean, giving birth to this most beautiful goddess. There was also her son Eros, the little god of love, who was also a god born for a special reason. The continuous seaweed broke through the surface of the sea like a thin snake, winding towards Apollo, hindering his movement. The turbulent hurricane stirred the sea, and the endless wind and waves swept the world like invisible fists, bombarding Apollo at the center. And the majestic and turbulent waves rolling and rising were even more ups and downs, shaking the ocean, carrying infinite power, and smashing everything. Being surrounded and attacked in the center, Apollo's expression was full of regret. In this era, natural gods are too rare. It's a pity I will reduce their number by 3 again today. If your strength can match your arrogance, this is still possible. The 3 natural sea gods laughed coldly as they pushed their divine power to the limit. There was also a sneer on Achilles' face over there, and a whirlpool gushed out, rushing towards Apollo. The combined power of the 4 upper gods sealed off the ocean and the sky. Even Ares couldn't control his surprise. Achilles and the other 3 are all at the top of upper gods, and they are all sea gods. While standing on the ocean, they can compete with the main god alone. The power of the 4 together is difficult for even the real main god. Looking at the hurricane, waves, whirlpools, and seaweed that spread alarmingly in the crystal, Hera's face was full of pleasure. She couldn't wait to see Apollo being slapped to pieces by the endless waves. At this moment, an incomparably brilliant light covered the crystal's view. Accompanied by the sacred and solemn voice of Apollo. I am the god of light, and my glory shines on all beings, my glory travels in the heaven, earth, and sea. Chapter 24. The Kingdom of Light, Killing the 3 Gods. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What is this? Hera's face changed wildly when the crystal was utterly shrouded in brilliant light. And on the ocean. Apollo suddenly released infinite blazing light when Achilles and the other 3 gods attacked. The divine golden light was brighter than the sun in the vast sky, like flowing gold, swaying between the sea and the sky, and the world fell into the kingdom of light. In an instant, a glorious divine light enveloped Achilles and the other 3 gods. In the dazzling golden light, Apollo was like a god walking in the human world, and his eyes first focused on Les, the god of seaweed. The infinite light shrouded. Boom! The glorious flood of light became the last color of this natural god's life. When the blazing divine light enveloped him, the sea grass he wrapped around the 8 sides was the first to wither, and his body began to burn and disintegrate. Then there was his spiritual body. Under the envelope light, he melted like ice in the blink of an eye. As Achilles and the other 2 gods watched in horror, the god of seaweed, Les, died. Not only them but Astrea, who was watching the battle, and Hecate and Ares, who were still fighting, watched this scene in shock. It was unbelievable. He was a god born from the time of the first generation of gods and traversed the sea for countless years. In just one encounter, he died with no resistance. No one could stop the golden light, and then Apollo looked at Gorgon. The god of raging waves was horrified, and he rolled up the majestic waves in a panic and slapped at Apollo. It was not to hurt the enemy but to buy time for their own escape. The gift of light, you can't stop it. Apollo opened his mouth solemnly, and the infinite light enveloped Gorgon, and the raging waves could not hinder the power of light at all. At the moment of contact, they all collapsed and disintegrated. The glorious divine light illuminated the god of raging waves. Then his body and spirit slowly dissolved, and he also ended up like less. Gorgon, the god of raging waves, had died. How is this possible? How is this possible? Achilles was in an agitated state of mind. He had arranged for many days and summoned the three upper gods. Such a lineup was enough to kill any god under the main god. Apollo is only an upper god, so why is he so strong? His two eyes obliterated two immensely powerful upper gods. Unless they were the top ones, even the main gods probably didn't have such mighty power, right? He was puzzled, horrified, frightened, and finally despaired. Just because those golden eyes had already turned towards him. Achilles, son of the Lord of the Ocean, welcomed the gift of light. Apollo's expression was sacred, like a devout believer walking in the world to preach the God's way, swaying infinite divine light to dispel the darkness. The place where he stood was the field of light, the place where he looked was where he directed the gifts of light. The kingdom of light travels through heaven, earth, and sea. The God of light, who gave light by grace. Boom! The blazing rays of light surged rapidly, roaring like thunder in the sky, judging all beings on the earth. Achilles had no way to dodge it, and the blazing divine light had already shrouded him. Ares, help me! In fear, Achilles screamed to Ares for help. Hearing his shout, Ares let out a soft grunt. In the realm of war shrouded in the body, the majestic suffocating aura suddenly soared, and scenes of swords, war, blood, and death condensed and converged, rushing towards Hecate. But at this time, Hecate also filled with a serene picture, with the sky, the earth, the ocean, the underworld, and more like the sparks of wisdom and civilization, splashing and intertwining. This scroll resisted Ares' realm of war. Damn, you are just a newly promoted main god. Why are you already a third rank? Ares roared in disbelief. Reaching the rank of the main god was already the limit of talents and bloodline of many gods, and every step of progress was challenging. That's why it was subdivided into 9 levels. The son of the dignified king of the gods, who was in charge of the war, was born for nearly 10,000 years but only reached the 3rd rank of the main god. Why could a god who had just been promoted could reach the same realm as himself? He was not convinced and controlled the war power of blood and fire to attack Hecate. The latter sneered. A barbarian like you can't break through me. The gloomy and dark domain spread like a barrier, blocking the blood and fire of war. After reaching the rank of the main god, the most important thing was your own symbol of authority and the power of the domain. Using the power of the gods to condense a domain, as long as the main god was standing within, it was as if he had supreme authority, dominating everything. This was the most powerful aspect of the main god. Initially, it was impossible for a newly promoted main god to fully adapt to the power of the domain. But Hecate's wisdom and talent were the best of the gods, and she had thoroughly studied the essence of divine power and created magic. As soon as she was promoted, she had complete control over the power of the domain. Although she was inexperienced at this moment, she still resisted Ares's full impact. Why are you so useless, Ares? No wonder mortals say that Athena is the god of war. Achilles was desperate and scolded. Suddenly, he saw another god who was not far from him, the god of hurricanes, Frottle. Gritting his teeth, he violently unleashed his divine power, and a vortex attacked him. Flutter, also fleeing in panic, suddenly fell into the sea. Under the whirlpool's impact, he flew right in front of Achilles. The light of the sky covered him. Achilles, curse you! Frottle let out a final roar of rage. After struggling to roll up dozens of hurricanes, the vast sea vibrated. But this natural disaster, like wind and waves, in front of the infinite light, was like tofu and instantly shattered. Then, Frottle melted like ice. The kingdom of light shines on everything. Apollo's eyes were bright as he stepped on the infinite light. Achilles fled to Ares in horror. He begged for mercy. Apollo, I will never help Hera again, please let me go. Looking at his terrified face, Apollo said indifferently. You have no chance, the splendor of light will wash away all sins. Chapter 25. Ares Madness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 25. Ares Madness. What the hell is going on? In Olympus, Hera panicked and focused on the crystal in front of her that was filled with dazzling golden light. An ominous premonition filled her heart. In the queen's name of the gods, the light fades away. She bit her lips lightly and urged her divine power to surge into the crystal. Under the authority and power of the Queen of Gods, the light covering the crystal gradually dimmed. She saw the scene inside, and her beautiful face was suddenly filled with incredulity. Gorgon, Flottle, Les, all of them died. How is this possible? What happened? She roared angrily, and her beautiful eyes concentrated on the picture in the crystal. She couldn't believe it. Facing against the three powerful upper gods, even the main god would find it difficult to kill them. Apollo is only an upper god, how can he have such strength? This is absurd and wrong. While she was in a daze, the splendid figure chasing after Achilles, shrouded in eternal light, twisted his golden eyes as if he had discovered something. The corners of his mouth curled up in a light smile. In an instant, a blazing light that far surpassed the previous one suddenly enveloped the crystal, and Apollo once again obscured the picture. He discovered me. Hera's face froze. This crystal was given to her by her mother, Rhea, and it had the ability to see the world. Because of this crystal's existence, she could quickly discover it every time Zeus went out. Even Zeus could not hide from the crystal's surveillance. He could not block its exploration unless it were the domain of a few primordial gods. The difficulty of discovering its surveillance was not as tricky as shielding it, though, that also required at least reaching the 6th rank of the main god or above to have such an ability. He's only an upper god, why was he able to spot me? Hera's face was full of panic. Could it be that Apollo had been promoted to the main god long ago, and she didn't know it yet? Her body shuddered at the thought of this possibility. Was that Hera just now? What a powerful monitoring artifact, it's a pity that it can't probe me in the Aurora domain. In the infinite light, Apollo's eyes flashed. He turned his gaze back to Achilles, who was running away. With Flottle's life and Apollo's time to deal with Hera's search. The son of the ocean lord had already fled to Ares in a hurry. Rubbish, didn't you just beg for mercy from him? Ares, who was fighting with Hecate, sneered, but there was still a war domain on his body, covering Achilles. At this moment, the power of light that filled the sky poured out violently. The war picture was composed of blood and fire, the sword clanging, and the evil spirit sweeping blocked the power of light. Ares's face was shocked at first, and he looked coldly at Apollo, who came slowly. It turns out that it is the power of the domain. You have already been promoted to the main god. Having a domain doesn't mean being the main god, Apollo whispered calmly, and the Aurora domain around him suddenly expanded, crashing into Ares with a bang. The system marked 2 stars on this divine skill once it was opened in the treasure chest of the Sea Emperor's palace. This was a divine skill that imitated the main god's domain authority as well as the main god's domain power at the 9th tier. When he pushed his power to the extreme, he could exert the power of the domain that was not inferior to the 9th rank of the main god. Apollo could only exert less than half of his power at the moment, but his strength was still enough to compare to the domain power of the 6th rank of the main gods. This was the reason he could detect Hera's crystal probing. Of course, the consumption of such a powerful divine skill was also substantial. It was not wrong that the ordinary upper god peak could support it for 10 breaths. However, Apollo had the most divine source of crystals. Besides helping to boost power, these crystals could also replenish divine energy quickly. The power of light was like a splendid torrent, pouring out on the blood and fire of war like a rain curtain. Ares sneered at first. But when the 2 grand domains collided, the domain of blood and war raging with evil spirits immediately began to evaporate. The majestic light was like the highest divine ability, washing away all the world's blood and fire. To end the conflict, to end the blood and fire, to cleanse the slaughter. The war domain rumbled and trembled and showed signs of collapse. Ares looked surprised. Achilles beside him was already trembling. Ares, let's escape. Shut up. How can I be a deserter when I am a war god? Ares roared with rage, the shield and great sword in his hand blossomed with a bloody aura at the same time, and he added a powerful force to the surrounding domain to stabilize the situation. At the same time, he yelled at Apollo and Hecate. Come together, I will let you understand what the power of the god of war is. What god of war? I think it's the god of bragging. Hecate sneered and was about to go up and join forces with Apollo. Apollo glanced at her with golden eyes and said lightly, only I am enough. You have to be careful. Hecate was a little worried, she knew Apollo hasn't become the main god yet. Under the glorious light, Apollo took a step forward with a smile, his handsome face with sharp edges and corners like a sculpture, and it was like casting gold under the dazzling light. His slender and upright figure revealed unparalleled holiness and magnificence. Hecate couldn't help but look a little crazy. Astria's face in the distance was also full of amazement, and her bright eyes flashed with brilliance. Suddenly, the domain of infinite light expanded again. The mass of golden divine light was like a burning flame, burning nothingness. The surge of mighty power roared and surged, affecting the war domain. Boom! The earth-shattering roar shook the ocean, and the surrounding space cracked open, making it pitch black and terrifying. When the light and the blood and fire collided, Ares's face suddenly flushed, and the shield and the great sword in his hands trembled as if he could not bear it. Ares, hang in there. Looking at the golden light that covered the ground in the sky, Achilles looked panicked. Get lost. Ares's eyes widened, and he let out a low growl like thunder. Holding the shield and the great sword tightly in both hands, the hair on his head stood up one by one, his burly body became swollen, and his skin was blood-red every inch. His mighty force was like a flood breaking the bank, surging into the war domain. He stared at the golden figure in front of him and roared in his mouth. It's okay to lose to Athena. I don't believe that I can't even deal with you, Apollo. When the words fell, Ares struggled to raise the great sword in his hand, and endless blood and fire burned. It turned into a shocking blood-red sword. Chapter 26. The Death of Achilles. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The flames rose in his blood, and his blade clattered softly, spreading out like a gray scroll symbolizing death, and war, was the end of civilization. The light that belonged to war turned into a blood-red color. It was like a river over the sea. It was a bloody light. It was also sword light. Wrath of the god of war. Ares roared like thunder and performed his most vital divine skill. At this moment, the world was inexplicably restless, and the mighty force called war surged between the vast sky and the earth. Apollo bore the brunt of it. The endless red aura of war rolled up like a huge wave and rumbled over the area of the bright light. In an instant, the burning light dimmed a lot. Apollo. Both Hecate and Astrea were grave and hesitant to help. Hera sensed the restless war atmosphere in Olympus, and a faint smile overflowed on her beautiful cheeks. To be able to force Ares to such a point, son of Leto, you are indeed excellent. Humph, no matter how you found out about my surveillance, I will never believe that you are already at the 6th rank of the main god. Athena had to pay a great price to face Ares' war god's wrath when she was a 5th rank main god. At that time, Ares was a 2nd rank main god, but now he is already a 3rd rank main god. With this blow, even if you don't die, you will be seriously injured. Looking at the crystal that was still shrouded in golden light in front of her, she said with hatred in her eyes. At the same time, she activated the authority of the Queen of Gods so that Zeus, who was enjoying time with a certain goddess, could not detect the fluctuations of the power of war without taking the initiative to probe. At the same time, many gods sensed the roar of the power of war, and they were all alarmed and turned their attention to the ocean following the aura. But just then, another even more vast aura of light spread out. Standing in the aurora domain, Apollo's eyes were bright, and the two-star divine artifact 7-stringed lyre emerged in his hand. When the infinite light bloomed, his fingers gently fiddled with this artifact. Clang! The clear sound of the lyre rang out like a dragon's cry. It played sacred music in the kingdom of light, and the solemn gospel spread across the universe. When the blood-colored rays of light in the sky swelled, the layers of crisp music, entrained with the power of infinite light, surged up and down the sky. Boom! Blood, light, and sound waves intertwined, the majestic aura poured out in all directions, and the sacred radiance shone across the sky, making a continuous loud noise. Can the lyre also be a weapon? No, only the sword is the color of war. Ares's blood was steaming, and the big sword in his hand was raised high, condensing the frightening power of war and roaring out. The terrifying aura filled the sea for millions of miles, and the morose fluctuations made many startled gods tremble. Achilles, who was hiding behind Ares, let out a long sigh of relief with a happy smile on his face. Can you take on such power, Apollo? Boom! The blood-red aura slashed through the air, and the surrounding space split into huge, pitch-black cracks. The pressure of death roared. Sitting cross-legged in the light, Apollo looked indifferent. His slender 5 fingers smoothly fiddled with the lyre on his lap, and a beautiful melody suddenly emerged. Countless power of light condensed and merged into these sounds. The sky, darkened by war's aura, was suddenly filled with light again. The golden brilliance shone on the sea, and the crisp notes jumped in the air, like the waves jumping in the rolling waves, whistling in every breeze. The blue sky, the sea, the breeze, and the music formed a harmonious picture. Hecate and Astria's hearts could not help but be filled with concentration. Their clear eyes were focused on the graceful figure in the boundless light that played this sacred music. When the blood-colored sword light that tore through space rumbled down, this harmonious music blossomed into a monstrous light, and the raging power swept through the sky like an angry tide lurking for a long time. Boom! The power of war surged, and the power of death shook the world. The notes surged, the brilliant light tore through the bloody aura, and the giant sword shattered. Puff! Ares coughed out a mouthful of blood as his expression was full of unwillingness, and he supported his body with his big sword. The power of light swept across, and the war domain around him disintegrated inch by inch. Ares roared, trying to save something. But Apollo stood up. The power of light rolled violently, and Apollo destroyed most of the war domain in the blink of an eye. What to do? Achilles hid behind Ares in fear, his eyes full of horror. Ares tried to say something, but a mouthful of blood came out again, and his body shook and flew backward. Ares! Achilles cried out, looking at the surrounding war domain, which was about to be completely shattered. He roared and rushed to the distant sea without caring about anything else. You can't escape. Apollo glanced at him, and his figure turned into golden light to pursue him. Don't go, let's fight again. Ares struggled to get up, picked up his sword to intercept Apollo, and his eyes were red. I'll teach you a lesson later. Apollo looked at him, and the mighty power of light rushed toward Ares like a huge wave. Boom! Ares swung the great sword, trying to split this majestic force, but he was unable to do so, and he coughed up blood and flew out. A brilliant light flashed, and Apollo appeared in front of Achilles' escape path. Where else do you want to escape to? Achilles screamed in horror. Apollo, spare me, I don't dare to be your enemy anymore. So these are your last words. In the golden light, his handsome face was unshakable. He indifferently stretched out his fingers, and a brilliant light enveloped Achilles. As Hecate, Astrea, and Ares watched, the son of the ruler of the ocean, the god of the whirlpool, melted and dissolved like an ice cube in the sweltering heat. Father God will not let you go. The god of the whirlpool, Achilles, dissolved into light as he uttered his last words hoarsely. At the moment of his death, the entire sea suddenly shook, and a huge river surrounding the world, like an angry older man, swirled violently under the vast sky. An old and majestic tall figure, wearing a crown and holding a spear, appeared coldly, with anger in his eyes. Chapter 27. Power to shake Oceanus. Athena intervenes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Son of Leto, do you know what you have done? The magnificent ocean and river wrapped around the world like a belt. Oceanus' eyes were full of anger. He clenched the spear in his hand and focused on the handsome boy bathed in the golden light. His anger shook the whole heaven. The oppressive force as vast as the ocean shrouded Apollo's shoulders with icy coldness. In the golden light, Apollo raised his head lightly, his bright eyes as calm as the abyss. His lips pursed, and he said lightly, "Isn't it just killing your son? Anyway, you have so many children. Why would you care? You are looking for death." Oceanus roared, suddenly raised the spear in his hand, and the power of the vast ocean and rivers surged and condensed, and the entire world shook. A powerful god was alarmed. Earlier, when Ares triggered the power of war, the people who were disturbed were actually ordinary gods. Existences above the realm of the main god were not very interesting. But at this moment, Oceanus condensed the terrifying power of the ocean and rivers, shaking the entire world instantly. Whether it was the sky or the earth, the ocean or the underworld, every god's expression changed. Especially in the depths of the ocean, Poseidon, who had just finished his child's coming-of-age ceremony, was sitting on the throne, calmly looking at the baby with the aura of the earth in his hands. Suddenly his expression was shocked. The power of the ocean and rivers has been fully activated. What is Oceanus doing? At the same time, in the dark underworld. On the pitch-black throne, the eyes of the king, who was wearing a black robe, which was originally closed, suddenly opened, revealing deep eyes like the abyss. The power of the great ocean rivers, who could have enraged this old man Oceanus to such an extent? There seems to be that vice ruler there that was recommended to me by the goddess Nyx some time ago. There was a hint of curiosity on his face. On Mount Olympus. Hera stared in disbelief at the crystal in front of her, which was still full of golden light. She muttered, "Achilles is dead, and Oceanus is going to attack." She was somewhat unable to accept the situation. At this moment, her face became ugly, and she spit out a mouthful of blood. On the vast land, somewhere on the grass covered with flowers, Zeus, who was leaning on a beautiful girl, sensed something, and his face suddenly changed. What's going on here? The fluctuations of the oceanic rivers are fully invoked, next to the war power of Ares, and the aura of that child Leto. No, why would I only find out now? With an ugly face, he suddenly spread his hoofs, rushed to the sky, and roared. Hera! Ah! That beautiful young girl looked at the scene with surprise and great bewilderment. Why did this bull know how to fly and speak? All the gods were shaken by the furious strike of Oceanus. On the vast sea, Apollo also felt the mighty majesty of the power of the rushing ocean and river. The strength of Oceanus was probably at the 7th or even 8th level of the main god. But there was no fear on his face, he played the lyre, and the power of infinite light poured out into the void. Master of the ocean, all of this is Achilles' fault. Hecate suddenly shouted over there, then her divine power surged, and she came to Apollo's side. Seeing her figure, the surging spear of the original imposing Oceanus stalled abruptly. He had not forgotten the dark power that emerged from this junior last time. Achilles was indeed only one of his 3,000 sons, although he was excellent. But was it worth it to offend goddess Nyx for him? He hesitated and snorted coldly, "All I know is that you killed my children." Introverted. Looking at the hesitant expression of Oceanus, the idiom of his previous life appeared in Apollo's heart. He looked at Hecate. It's useless to say more, only strength can make him recognize the reality. Staring at the handsome face in front of him, Hecate couldn't help but feel completely relieved. It doesn't matter that Oceanus was a strong man standing at the top of the main god rank, the ruler of one of the gods. She nodded her head with no hesitation. Apollo swept across his clean face with a smile, the lyre in his hand suddenly played, and the power of infinite light was blessed on the lyre, bursting out with overwhelming power. At the same time, Hecate also fully exploded her own divine power of the third rank of the main god. Two powerful forces suddenly merged in mid-air, rushing towards the surging ocean river. You are looking for death. Oceanus snapped back to his senses, and his face was full of rage. He no longer had the previous hesitant expression, and the spear in his hand fiercely stabbed down. Boom! Everyone's expressions changed, and the world shook. The three violent forces clashed bitterly in the air. The power of oceans and rivers was boundless, and Oceanus was one of the most powerful main gods. He who dominated one of the gods had already reached the terrifying level of the 8th rank of main gods. But as Apollo stood in the Aurora domain, his strength was already comparable to the 6th rank of the main god, and the lyre in his hand was evaluated with 2 stars, which was comparable to the top main divine artifact. Under the superposition of the two, the power had reached the ultimate power of the 7th rank main god, approaching the 8th rank of the main god. Then, there was the blessing of the power of Hecate, a 3rd rank main god. It ultimately reached the 8th rank of the main god. On the other hand, Oceanus was hesitant in his heart, and he was already a step behind when he attacked. Boom! Under the gaze of the gods, 2 vast forces collided, tearing apart layers of the void and shattering the sky and the sea. Under the impact of divine power, Ocean Lord Oceanus froze and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and his arm holding the spear trembled. The teenagers and girls standing side by side below remained motionless. Some gods exclaimed, Oceanus actually missed. Who are these 2 young gods? I know that goddess. She is Hecate, who was chosen by the goddess Nyx and appointed as the vice-ruler of the underworld. It turned out to be her. What about the blonde male god? He seems younger but stronger. He seems to be the son of king of gods and goddess Leto, Apollo, who was born with golden light in the sky. Apollo, how long has he been born? The gods were shocked and agitated, and their voices were filled with disbelief. Faintly aware of the discussion of the gods, Oceanus' face was gloomy, and the great momentum enveloped Apollo and Hecate, and the spear in his hand was urged again. Apollo, pay for my son's life. The oceans and rivers surrounding the world roared and trembled, and the boundless and vast power once again blessed the spear. Apollo and Hecate looked at each other, focused at the same time, and were about to strike back. At this moment, a graceful figure suddenly appeared on the sea in the distance, with an exquisite figure and a tall and straight figure, with long golden hair shining under the sky and a beautiful face full of a confident smile. Chapter 28. Declaration of War and the King of the Gods. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It was Athena. How could she have appeared? The beautiful figure of the young woman attracted the attention of many gods in the shadows, and they immediately recognized the most dazzling goddess of Olympus. Athena's eyes were solemn, and a bright spear suddenly appeared in her slender palm. On the snow-white neck like a swan, an exquisite and beautiful face full of heroic spirit looked up at the sky and let out a light sigh. Boom! The ocean river meandered and revolved around the edge of the world. Boundless surging river water rumbled in the sky, shaking the void. Oceanus swung his spear, tearing apart the sky and destroying the order. The entire world was left with only boundless water and endless waves, and the huge waves were surging, filling the earth. The sharp spear pierced through the heavens and the earth. But at this moment, another dazzling spear of light burst forth from Athena's fair and slender hands on the sea. Puff! The glory of wisdom shone in heaven and earth, and the most dazzling goddess of Olympus stepped out of the light belonging to the direction of victory. The brilliant golden light reflected in her upright figure, the bright spear tore apart the dullness of heaven and earth, bringing the light of wisdom and civilization. Boom! The spear collided between the sky and the sea, and the world trembled and swayed at this moment. During the shock of power, Oceanus roared angrily. Athena, do you know what you are doing? Boom! The ocean river meandered, the sky suddenly shook and shattered, and endless waves fell into the sea. Oceanus swayed, and a bright slit opened in his chest, dripping with dark red blood. On the other side, the light on Athena was also a little dim, but she still stood on the ocean with glory. Looking at the angry Oceanus above, she came to Apollo and mumbled. Lord of Ocean, you should stop. Oceanus steadied himself and focused on the heroic girl standing before the enemy who had killed his son. His aged eyes were filled with rage. He heard a thunderous roar. Athena, your mother is also my daughter, and Achilles is your uncle, how can you help the man who killed him? Athena's lips pursed up, and she said quietly, did you really ever consider my mother as your daughter? She sneered, and her face became serious again. I have always been the proudest daughter of the king of the gods, and Apollo is my younger brother with the same father as me. Why shouldn't I help him? You. Oceanus clenched his palm tightly, staring at the bright and beautiful figure below, and the broken ocean river behind him rolled out stormy waves one after another. In a daze, he recalled the same stubborn figure that stood in front of him thousands of years ago. Métis, your daughter, is really like you. When you disobeyed me and helped brother Zeus, you ended up in a miserable end. I don't think your daughter's fate will be better than yours. Oceanus said angrily in his heart. On the vast sea, Apollo quietly stared at the heroic girl standing in front of him, and his eyes were slightly puzzled. Why did Athena help himself and the family of the descendants of Zeus? That was really a joke. As if sensing his gaze, Athena smiled as she turned around. A graceful smile appeared on her face as she said, are you moved? Come on, call me sister first. Then I'll protect you next time. Apollo said nothing. Suddenly, a roar sounded in the distance. Athena, you really like this little white face of him. What is the same bloodline of the father god? Apollo looked over, but Ares was sent flying by him. He did not know when he came back. Holding the sword in ragged clothes, he looked at himself and Athena with angry eyes, with a little grievance deep in his regards. He was probably thinking. Why are you so cruel to me when we have the same father god? Apollo touched his handsome cheek, and then looked at Ares' face, and suddenly felt that he was right. Athena was also a visual animal. Athena, since you insist on defending the son of Leto, then I, the god of oceanic rivers, will represent the oceanic gods and go to war with you. Oceanus roared again in the sky above, and the figures of gods faintly flashed in the winding river behind him. Those were the oceanic gods. After receiving orders from Oceanus, they appeared behind him one by one, releasing powerful pressure. Oceanus, this old man, is going to play for real. The gods who were watching the battle in secret were shocked. In Olympus, Hera, who was the source of all events, was also stunned at the moment. She never imagined that things would turn out like this, that 4 upper gods and 1 main god failed to kill Apollo. Achilles actually died on the spot, and Oceanus, the lord of the ocean, who had many children and had never said much about his children, appeared in person. But surprisingly, it didn't take down Apollo either. Athena, a woman, actually came forward to help him. Now, Oceanus was leading the entire oceanic gods to war. This series of changes were entirely beyond her expectations. Things evolved to a point where they shook the gods. The previous backlash was because the king of God had discovered that I blocked him, Hera fell on the seat with a pale face, and her eyes went weak. Damn, it's all Apollo's fault. Why is he so strong, killing 4 upper gods, defeating Ares, and fighting against Oceanus? Slumped on the chair, she roared unwillingly and with a bit of fear. Faintly, she realized Apollo was beyond her grasp. And on the sea, with the appearance of the gods of the oceanic gods, more and more majestic coercion loomed over the sky. Apollo looked somewhat grave. Athena stood firmly in front of him, like a thick wall blocking all wind and rain. When the powerful coercion of the gods of the ocean swept through, the goddess of wisdom had cold eyes and raised her bright face. Lord of the ocean, since you are going to fight, then I will follow Olympus. Olympus. Oceanus frowned and roared, Athena, don't talk nonsense, I just want you to hand over Apollo, and the target of the war is you, not Olympus. Athena laughed lightly. To wage war against the favorite daughter and son of the king of the gods and to say that it is not a declaration of war against Olympus, do you think that is justified, Father God? Suddenly, countless lightning bolts suddenly gathered in the sky, and a stalwart figure with a thunderbolt walked out among the silver-white arcs. Looking at Athena, he said indifferently. No reason, I also want to know who is going to declare war on Olympus. Chapter 29. The Domineering Zeus. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The silver-white lightning arcs were like thin snakes as they swam in the sky. The bright lightning interweaved with the waves of destruction. The entire world suddenly fell silent. Short brown-black hair, a straight nose, thin lips, and deep eyes made up a majestic face. His robe was shrouded in silver-white, and the slender figure was like a mountain standing in the sky. He used the thunder as his symbol. The sky was his reflection, the gods were his vassals, and the beings were his lambs. Surrounded by thunder, Zeus coldly gazed at the entire void. Oceanus looked shocked and bowed his head to him with fear in his eyes. Your Majesty, please don't listen to Athena's nonsense, the oceanic gods are absolutely not enough. Zeus looked at him indifferently, with thunder and lightning intertwined on his body. A wave of destruction permeated, and an intense pressure enveloped the world. Oceanus' body trembled. He couldn't help but think of the great figure who defeated the Titan gods who once ruled the world during the Titan War in the past. Fear welled up in his heart. He lowered his head and fell silent. The gods secretly watching the battle were also silent. One by one, they withdrew their observant gaze, not daring to try to offend the majesty of the king of gods. Only then did Zeus look down. His gaze landed on the golden-haired Apollo. Apollo was also watching his father, the supreme king of the gods in Greek mythology. In his previous life, when talking about Greek mythology, he mostly joked about Zeus's romantic history, but few people understood the power of this king of the gods. The Greek mythology theme was fate. No one could go against what was destined to happen. Even 2 generations of kings of gods, such as Uranus and Cronus, had fallen under the prophecy of fate. But Zeus didn't. There were several prophecies that they would overthrow him, but they were all resolved by him one by one. He defeated the Titans, suppressed the ocean and the underworld, killed Gigantes, destroyed the Typhoon Rebellion, and was the only existence that successfully fought against fate. No one had ever been able to overthrow him, not even to shake his rule. Wise people, like Athena, could only bow their heads as a minister, while prophets, like Prometheus, were bound in the Caucasus Mountains and tortured day and night. Such a powerful god made people think of him as a romantic and heartless person. They never thought of his true strength. His own strength and city government could be said to be terrifying. Apollo gazed at the king of the gods, was silent for a moment, and then looked away. Don't turn your head, let me retake a good look at you. Zeus' majestic voice came indifferently. In the next moment, thunder flashed, and he appeared in front of Apollo. He touched his stubble chin with his palm and said solemnly, You are indeed very handsome, but you also inherited my masculinity. You will be a great god. He patted Apollo on the shoulder and showed a broad smile. It was like an old father caring for his beloved child. Immediately, he continued. I know all the hardships you and your sister have suffered over the years, but I failed to watch Hera, but there will be no such thing in the future. Go back to Olympus, and I will grant you and your sister a place alongside Athena and Ares. Father God. Ares, who had been bowing his head since Zeus came over as if he didn't want to be seen in disgrace, screamed suddenly as if trying to protest. Zeus looked at him coldly and scolded. You blindly obeyed orders to kill brothers, now go back and shut up for 10 years. In the sky, Oceanus was also full of unwillingness and roared. King of God, your son killed my son, and you still want to give him the seat of the main god. Boom. As soon as he finished speaking, a thick thunder suddenly cut through the sky and hit him in the face. Get lost. How can your son be compared to my son? A terrifying aura erupted from Zeus. This terrifying aura made all the gods tremble, and it spread abruptly. Oceanus looked terrified. This was the authority of the king of gods, which had the power to suppress all gods. If he fought with his own full strength, he might not be much worse than Zeus as an 8th-rank main god. But once he used the authority of the king of gods, even a few primordial gods might not be able to match Zeus. Back then, his father, the first-generation king of gods, Uranus, had used the authority of the king of gods to suppress his mother, Gaia, until she could not breathe. Later, the mother could only instigate her brothers to overthrow the father's rule and deprive the power of the king of the gods before defeating him. Then the mother divided the authority of the king of gods into 3 parts, namely the sky, the ocean, and the underworld, and also the king of gods, the sea emperor, and the underworld king. Although the power of the king of gods possessed by Zeus was not as good as it was in the past, it was still an unparalleled power that was enough to suppress all gods. As the thunder surged, Oceanus couldn't help but think of the terrifying face of his father, Uranus. He also disregarded the many of the oceanic gods and directly turned into a wave of water, rushing to the other side of the sky. Heh, what a gutless rat. Zeus sneered coldly and looked at Apollo again, softening in a blink of an eye. As long as you are by Father God's side in the future, there will be no gods who can bully you. What is this, sweet dates and big sticks, trying to move to take me in? Apollo was a little speechless. If he didn't know what Zeus was like, he would have thought that his father was merciful and filial. Thinking about Zeus's thoughts in his heart, he squeezed a smile on his face and lowered his head. Apollo has seen Father God, and thank Father God for upholding justice for me. He seems to agree, but there's still some dissatisfaction in his eyes. Has he disliked me for all these years? That's right. I'll conquer him slowly in the future. He's only been born for so long and can defeat Ares. In the future, he'll definitely become my powerful arm to rule the gods. However, I have to be wary of him threatening me. Zeus saw through Apollo's forced smile and said kindly, bring your sister to Olympus as soon as possible. I look forward to showing your eyes to the gods. Apollo also followed suit. The two of them chatted and laughed lovingly on the surface of the sea. Athena could not help but frown and beat Ares. Chapter 30. Meeting Artemis. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Well, although he still harbors resentment, he's behaving quite well. After talking with Apollo about filial piety to the father, Zeus nodded in his heart. Looking to Athena. You did well today. I would like nothing better than to see you children get along and be closer to Apollo and his sister Artemis in the future. Athena nodded and said, the daughter understands the meaning of the father. She felt keenly in her heart that when he looked at her and Apollo, there was a trace of scorn in Zeus' eyes. She immediately reacted. The Father God, himself, was worried about his children's rebellion, and the strength shown today was no less than Oceanus, and Apollo will undoubtedly be one of the strongest main gods in the future. Plus, his sister Artemis. If the three powerful children had a good relationship, wasn't it threatening his throne? It seems that he is not particularly close to Apollo for the time being. Maybe Apollo can pretend not to deal with her sister. Athena thought that. Then Zeus looked at Hecate and Astrea and suddenly smiled and said to Apollo, "They are both very beautiful goddesses. When you grow up, I will give you a marriage." Apollo was stunned and silent at this moment. He saw Zeus turn into lightning and fly out into the sky. When he turned back, both Hecate and Astrea were blushing. Astrea directly said, "Apollo, I think it will not take long to see you on Mount Olympus." "Well, I feel like I'm about to be promoted to the main god recently, so I'll go back to the stars first." After saying that, she flew away like starlight. Hecate was much bolder, and she blinked her eyes while staring at Apollo and said, "The king of gods asked you to go to Olympus, and there will be fewer opportunities for us to meet in the future." Apollo felt her sadness and smiled. "The life of the gods is endless, we will always have a chance to be together." "Well then, I plan to go to the underworld to find the goddess Nyx to improve myself, so you must remember to visit me." Hecate went up to hug him and immediately disappeared into the ocean. Apollo was a little disappointed. An excellent male god always attracts the goddess's admiration. "Aren't you very distressed?" Athena's teasing voice appeared in his ear. Apollo looked at her and asked calmly, "Then, are you such a goddess?" Athena thought about it seriously and replied, "In my eyes, you are just a younger brother. The male god that can make me admire should at least be at the top of the main gods." "From the top of the gods, you mean?" Apollo's eyes flashed. He suddenly said, "You joined the alliance of goddess Amphitrite just for this to gain strength. If you want to do such a big thing, you always need some allies, so I suggest you show more charm and gain more love from the goddesses so that there will be more allies. Our father did the same." Athena's tone was calm. "You still only see the surface. Only your own strength is the real foundation. Besides, I won't be a person like him. That's definitely not me you want to see." Apollo smiled and walked into the distance. "Won't be a second Zeus. I hope you always remember that." Staring at the golden figure walking under the setting sun, Athena couldn't help muttering. In Mount Othries. The place where Cronus, the god of celestial bodies, and the goddess of light, Phoebe, lived in seclusion. At the end of the Titan War, the second-generation god King Cronus was defeated and was thrown into Tartarus. The two powerful Titan gods retreated here. In the snowy sky, there was a slim girl in a short skirt, carrying a bow and arrow and waiting in silence. Artemis. Apollo. Staring at each other, both of them smiled at the same time. "I've heard about you, you must have suffered a lot over the years." Artemis came to Apollo. The things about Apollo were already known to the gods, and even their grandparents were amazed by their grandson's achievements. He was born less than 30 years ago, and he was able to fight against Oceanus. What kind of talent was this? The gods were shocked by Apollo, the son of the king of the gods. However, Artemis only felt sorry for Apollo. "It's all because I'm useless. If I was more outstanding than you, Hera would definitely target me, and you could live quietly in the ocean." She stroked Apollo's cheek, her eyes filled with remorse and pity. "Sister." Apollo was a little overwhelmed and thought about taking out the heart of the deep sea that Amphitrite had given him. "This is the gift I brought you." Artemis stared at the pearl in front of her, stunned, and immediately sensed something, and hurriedly said, "Although the energy contained in it is of the ocean attribute, it also has a great effect on other gods. You are about to reach the main god, so I'll leave it to you." "Sister, didn't you say you wanted to be strong and protect me?" Apollo smiled, grabbed her fair palm, and put the heart of the deep sea in her hand. With a lot of divine origin crystals, he actually did not lack the auxiliary treasures, and for Artemis, this heart of the deep sea was undoubtedly more helpful. Being grabbed by the palm, Artemis was a little embarrassed, and her voice was as thin as a gnat. Mother and grandfather are all waiting there. Will mother come with us to Olympus? Apollo asked. Artemis shook her head. Mother said she only wanted to stay with her grandfather and let us explore our own future without worrying about her. Apollo's eyes flickered, and he glanced up abruptly. Immediately, he grabbed Artemis' hand and said, "Let's go see the mother first."